Okay, so in this series, we are going to be going through Mitzvos. We starting this specifically now as a spiritual response to the terrible situation in Israel right now. And in a sense, we're all soldiers. We're all part of the Jewish people, and we're going to explore that concept in depth today, particularly. And our spiritual response is extremely meaningful and is really, really helpful to help the soldiers in Israel, the war in Israel. So many salvations we need from Hashem right now. So many people who need a refuah, who need a speedy recovery, and so many captured people who we need back home, and soldiers who need the help of Hashem as they go into a very dangerous environment and evil that needs to be eradicated from the earth, and so much more. So our spiritual response of learning more Torah is an amazing thing that we could do. And especially if we're far away, we might have limited ways we could help in a physical way, and that's all wonderful. But in a sense, we're on the front lines in our spiritual response. So we're going through different mitzvos, and there's different types of mitzvos. And then there are some mitzvos that seem to be a little unclear as where they fall in. There's a lot of things that if you'd ask people, do a mitzvah, help me with a mitzvah, or whatever it is, might be considered a mitzvah, but then if you want to actually look at the Torah, wait, maybe it doesn't talk about that. Okay, an example of just like a simple act of kindness for somebody else, we call that a mitzvah. Well, is it a mitzvah? If it's a mitzvah, that means it's a commandment from Hashem. A mitzvah is not a good deed. Mitzvah means commandment. So it means the Jewish people were commanded by Hashem to do certain things, and that would be a mitzvah. So it needs to be sourced in the Torah in some way or another for it to be a Jewish mitzvah that Hashem is commanding us to do. If it doesn't, it could still be a wonderful deed and a good thing to do, but it might not make the cut as a mitzvah. So the mitzvah we're going to talk about today is the mitzvah to be noseh b'ol im chaveirav, the mitzvah to feel the burden of your fellow Jew. And that is extremely relevant right now to this environment, to this war. It is very important that we feel the pain of our brothers and sisters in the land of Israel and all those who were affected and are affected and will be affected by this terrible situation. So the source for that we're going to see in a little bit. It's not the beginning of the material we're going over now. Is actually a mitzvah to imitate the ways of Hashem. The halachta b'drachav. We are commanded that as a mitzvah in the Torah portion of Ekev, to walk in the ways of Hashem. And we will see that Hashem feels the pain of the Jewish people, and therefore we are commanded to imitate Hashem and also feel the pain of our brothers and sisters. But we'll get to more of that soon. So now we're going to go into an overview, and there's a few main categories of this mitzvah that we're going to talk about. There's an endless amount of material here. We're going through some papers I printed out. We're probably not going to cover all these papers. These papers that I printed are only part of a 64-page PDF that I found on outorah.org that goes through like in unbelievable detail all of the nuances of this mitzvah, but I chose to focus on the ones that I feel relate most directly to the war and give a general overview without too much information that might defeat the purpose of helping us understand this, okay? So if you have the papers, you can follow along with me. I'm going to skim through some of them. I'm not going to focus on all of them, but let's go into a little bit of an overview. That's what we'll start with, okay? So if you're following along, you might see that I'm not reading literally word for word, but you should be able to follow along anyway. So there's different types of chesed, of kindness that we can do. There's chesed that's ordinary chesed, an act of kindness, and then there's a deeper level of chesed, and that is kindness that flows from the source of the Jewish soul. Okay, and Rav Matisyahu Salman is the quote here. He's the one who talks about this idea. And that means I'm doing something from my soul. I'm driven to help my friend because we are family, because his distress affects me, and I have some kind of pain because of him. I'm saving him because his pain is unbearable, and therefore I feel like I'm helping myself as well. It's not just that, it's not, as we'll see, it's not like this third party relationship where I know in this like abstract way that another Jew is in pain. It's meant to be first person, that I feel this like it's happening to me. When I act kindly towards a fellow Jew, it's done in the mode of a right hand bandaging the injured left hand of the same body. So we're all Jewish people are together. We're all rooted in one soul. And if I'm helping him, it's literally like my right hand helping my left hand. It's not helping somebody outside of me. Jewish people are sourced in souls that are inside of us. They're all bonded together, and therefore it's a very personal action of helping basically another part of our body. And this mitzvah of nosa ba'olam chaverov, to carry a fellow's pain, is talked about in Pirkei Avos, which we'll get to that in more detail. And again, the focus that this is because our souls are combined together. If one part of our body is hurting, is a very common theme that we talk about in Jewish people feeling each other's pain. If one part is hurting, every part is hurting. It's never going to be limited to one part of a body. The other part is always going to feel that pain as well. Okay, so let's move into Pirkei Avos. Moving on to the next page, page 8 over here. So in Avos it says Torah is greater than priesthood or royalty, because royalty is acquired with 30 ways and priesthood with 24 ways, but the Torah is acquired by 48 qualities. Okay, these are known as the 48 ways to acquire Torah. And one of them is noseh ba'al im chaverov, carrying your fellow Jew's pain. So this quote we're going to bring down from Rav Yerucham Levavitz in his book Das Chachma U'Musar. Says the midah of noseh ba'al means being a partner in all the pain and suffering of a friend, to feel distressed by all my friend's troubles. When my friend's flesh is cut, it feels as if I was cut. To the extent that one immerses himself in the pain of his friend, one alleviates the friend's suffering. Okay, so the way we're going to go through this now, I guess maybe a few more words of introduction in that sense, is, welcome, is we're going to go through some of the sources and the main ideas behind this mitzvah. There's two purposes in this, okay? I think it's important to mention this. There's two purposes. One purpose is so that we could have a hands-on guide on how we can sympathize and feel the pain of our brothers and sisters. That's one aspect of it. And the second aspect of it is we're learning Torah right now. We're going through Torah sources. We're learning Torah. So learning Torah is a tremendous merit to help and protect our brothers and sisters as well. So some of this, let's do it this way. The parts of this that you might find less practical, you can put in the Torah category. The parts of this that you find very practical in helping, giving strategies and guidance on how we can fulfill this mitzvah, that's going to help us be able to be noseh ba'olam chaver. That's why in starting this whole series, I want to start with mitzvos that relate to this war and this situation in Israel. Okay, so moving along here, we have this idea from Reb Chaim Friedlander on page 8. Rather than just giving goods or services to someone, we're giving him a piece of our very being, identifying with our friend, feeling as if we are partners in his pain, as if it is our own personal pain. Another application of noseh ba'al is feeling as if we are partners in our friend's happiness. That's the flip side of this. That's also very important. The essence of noseh ba'al is not to reduce or remove the other person's suffering, but rather to be with him in this time of distress and to feel his pain, to share in his suffering, even if we are unable to tangibly help him. So this is really, really important nuance here. The reason we feel in someone's pain is not to try to help them. It is an end goal of itself. It is a mitzvah in itself, just to feel the pain of a fellow Jew. Don't feel you're thousands of miles from Israel right now. You might feel you don't have a tangible way to help. So this is worthless. Now I'm just in pain and I'm sad and I'm feeling, but I can't help. It's like my hands are tied. Your hands are not tied. Feeling the pain of our brothers and sisters is a big mitzvah. It is a big help to them as well. We're going to talk about the importance of reaching out to them, helping how we could, making sure that they know that we sympathize for them. We don't want to just keep it a secret, to ourselves that we're sympathizing, that we're feeling the pain. But just feeling pain is a mitzvah, and it is an end goal in its own, and it is helpful, and Hashem looks down and he sees that we have this brotherhood, that we feel each other's pain, that we have this link of souls, and that's a big merit. That's a big merit that we can have, and a big merit that we can bring. Sometimes you just want to be heard. And okay, we're going to wait. We'll see. We're going to get to this other point.
If they don't know?
Yes, even if they don't know. But if they do know, you're helping them even more. You're helping them even more. But definitely, even if you can't help them solve the crisis that they're in, even if you can't give money or materials or supplies or guns or go out there and fight or whatever else it might be, we're helping them just by feeling that we're with them and feeling the pain of that. Which one is this?
Yeah, because
it's a mitzvah saseh.
We are not there. So
right.
When you are there, you're really obligated to go and help. Mm-hmm. But when you're far away, would this be mitzvahs lotaseh? Which means you are still doing the mitzvah in another form, but not direct.
Interesting. I think this is direct. I think helping in tangible ways is another mitzvah, is other mitzvahs. Maybe mitzvahs related to chesed, maybe mitzvahs related to war, maybe mitzvahs related to lo samad al dam reyecha, or there's other obligations to stand up and fight for the Jewish people. But feeling the pain of another Jew is direct, even if we're far away and even if we can't help in a tangible way. So let's move on to other aspects of this mitzvah. Okay, so I'm very excited about this next source from Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. And the reason why I'm excited about it is because I've had this feeling that these words I'm about to share are true, but I never had a source for it. And I've always just said, this is what I believe, and now I actually see a source for it. So what are we talking about? We're talking about the power that people have to give a blessing to another Jew, to give a bracha. So the story goes here. Rav Boaz Shalom writes that one time he had the courage to express his feelings to his rabbi, who was Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, a giant of a tzaddik who passed away a little while ago in Israel. And he came up and he went to basically compliment his Rebbe. And he said, every time I asked the Rav for advice or for a blessing, I sense the divine help inherent in the Rav's advice, and his blessing always comes to fruition. Okay, so the rabbi, Rav Shlomo Zalman, was humbly, waved that away, and he didn't want to, accept the honor that he was being given. And he said, people say that having one's blessing fulfilled is related to his greatness in Torah. In truth, this is not correct. Any person can accomplish this. Hashem listens to the blessings of any Jew who blesses one another, because we're all children of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and we all have this special power to give a bracha. Okay, the Talmud says, don't belittle the blessing of a simple person. It's a very powerful thing. Every Jew has the power to give a bracha. Okay, so what makes your bracha a superpower, a real bracha, a bracha that comes true? However, in order for a person's brachas to be fulfilled, he must truly desire that the other person will receive that good fortune. This is what I endeavor to do, to try to enter the other person's situation and truly desire that he receives those blessings. And I've always had this hunch. When you go to a tzaddik, you go to somebody for a blessing, there's something magical that happens there where you feel that he really, really wants this to come true. And I don't know if it's always like that, but certainly the idea is that when you give a bracha, that from the depth of your heart, you feel the person's pain, and you really give them a bracha, and you mean it, and you really want them to have a better fortune or whatever it is to improve, those are the blessings that become true. It's not based on the merits of the person giving, how much Torah he's learned and how much good actions he's done. It's how much does he care. So in essence, noseh ba'olam chavero is the power of giving a bracha. And that's what we see firsthand by this from this story. Okay, let's move along. We have a few more different angles I want to bring out on that. So we talked in the beginning how the real source of noseh ba'olam chavero is from Hashem. We actually learned this from Hashem. The halachta bidrachav. I'm actually going to skip page 10, and I'm going to just peek ahead to page 18 for a minute. Okay, the mitzvah of emulating Hashem's ways. This is the big category of what the mitzvah Nosa B'Ol is. The Rambam, Maimonides, writes a book of mitzvahs where he goes through all of the mitzvahs of the Torah. And this is the 8th mitzvah, according to the Rambam. The 8th mitzvah that we're commanded to emulate is that we are commanded to emulate Hashem. Exalted be He to the best of our ability. The source of this commandment is, and you shall go in His ways. That's in Devarim, in Parshas Ekev. The commandment is repeated in the verse, again, to go in all His ways. This is explained. Just as Hashem is called gracious, you too should be gracious. Just as Hashem is merciful, you too should be merciful. The explanation of this mitzvah is to emulate the good deeds and fine attributes which are used to describe Hashem, who is immeasurably exalted over everything. Okay? So that's the main mitzvah of following in the ways of Hashem. And then, as explained on the bottom here by the Tomer Devora, Hashem has a very powerful midah of, it's called in Hebrew, l'she'eris nachlaso. Okay? So let's read about that. Hashem's midah of l'she'eris nachlaso is the template on how to treat one's fellow. All Jews are closely related with one another because our souls are combined together. Every Jew has within himself a portion of another Jew's soul. For this reason, all Jews are responsible for one another because each Jew has a portion of his fellow within himself. Therefore, it is fitting for us to seek the benefit of our fellow. We should be pleased with his success, and his honor should be as important to us as our own, just as Hashem does not want our disgrace or pain, since we are his close relative. Similarly, we should not desire our fellow's disgrace or pain, and that's the basic idea of how we are emulating Hashem's ways. Okay, so that's why I started with this a little bit. That's the source of all this, is we want to imitate the ways of Hashem. Hashem feels the pain of Jewish people, and we want to feel the pain of our fellow Jews as well. Okay, let's get to one or two more points, and then I want to really get to some stories and some kind of like practical advice that they bring down at the end that I think will be maybe even the best takeaways for us. The other main role model of Nosa B'Ol in Jewish history is Moshe Rabbeinu. It would not be an underestimate to say that the reason why he was chosen to be the leader of the Jewish people was because of his compassion that he had for the Jewish people in their exile in Egypt. So if you look at page 14 here, on the top, and it happened in those days that Moshe grew up and went out to his brethren and saw their burdens, and he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew man of his brethren, of a Jew. And he saw their burden, Rashi explains, he focused his eyes and his heart to be distressed over them. And that's when Hashem called out. And then Hashem turned to Moshe and said, Moshe, Moshe, and he replied, Hineni, I'm here. That's when he was given the task to lead the Jewish people out of Egypt. It was the one who was feeling that burden, who felt the pain of his fellow Jews, that was going to be the one to take the Jews out of Egypt. And it says, continue this medrash on the bottom here. What does it mean that Moshe saw their burden? It alludes to the fact that Moshe would see their burden and share their sorrow to the extent that he would cry out, woe is to me on account of you. If only I could die for your sake. There is no work as hard as working with clay. And he would lend a shoulder and he would help. He took off his royal garments because he was raised in Paro's house. So he was like kind of raised in royalty. And he went down to be among the people. He left his higher place to be with his people, to suffer with his people. He would give them a helping hand from time to time as much as he was able to. And this is what gave him this ability to lead the Jewish people out of Egypt. Okay, so that's our ultimate role model. All right, let's skip ahead a bit. On page 21, also we're not going to go through all this, but on page 21, it talks about how Nosa B'Ol and Chaveroi and unity and Jewish unity are interdependent. The more we can feel at one, that we're one Jewish unit, the more we'll have the ability to feel in someone else's pain. And the opposite way works as well. The more we can feel in someone's pain, the more that will bring us to have more unity among the Jewish people. I think right now the Jewish people have a lot of unity, a lot of achdus in Am Yisrael right now, and that's a very powerful thing. And the fact that people all over the world, that Jews all over the world are clearly feeling the pain of our fellow Yidden in Israel is a very, very powerful concept. It's bringing a lot of merit to the Jewish people as well. Nosa Ba'ol is what powers a lot of mitzvos. A lot of mitzvos that we do are there to give us this kind of compassion for our fellow Jew. An example of this is giving charity. You see on page 22 here, the Rambam Maimonides talks about the way that we need to give charity. Anyone who gives charity to a poor person with an unpleasant face and with his face buried in the earth loses and destroys his merit even if he gives him 1,000 gold pieces. Isn't that powerful? Instead, he should give him charity with a pleasant manner and with happiness, commiserating with the poor person about his trouble. As it says, did I not weep for heavily burdened? Did not my soul feel sorry for the destitute? He should speak with him words of sympathy and comfort. The main power of tzedakah is nosa ba'al. So if we're giving charity and like somebody nudges us for money and we're like, okay, fine, I'll give you money, with that kind of attitude, then we're not fulfilling essentially the main heart, the beating heart of what charity is. Okay, so let's move on. Let's move on to page 34, and we'll go through like a couple little stories here and suggestions that I think are important. Then we could talk about this more and take questions, etc. All right, so page 34, the wise counsel of the Saba of Kelm. Visualizing another person's situation and struggles using mental imagery is crucial to being nosa ba'al chavera. And he gave two pieces of advice. When approached by a meshulach, a tzedakah collector, imagine ourselves thousands of miles from home, knocking on door after door to raise money for our family's needs. How would we want to be greeted and treated? Then do the same for the meshulach. Okay, that's practical in how we treat a tzedakah collector, but it's such a powerful way to just feel their pain. The discomfort and the embarrassment, etc., of knocking on doors, asking for money is horrible. If we could think about that, we could be nosa ba'al. It'll allow us to, first of all, fulfill this mitzvah and be able to be nosa ba'al, but also it'll lead to us having a lot of compassion towards someone who's collecting charity. I once did this when I was in Kollel in Israel. We just once had an exercise where we went to feel what it's like to collect charity. We went out to Machne Yehuda Shuk, big marketplace in Jerusalem, and we went with our whole Kollel with a tzedakah can, and our job was to walk around the shuk asking people for money. It was the worst experience of my life. It was horrible. It was hard.
Ant on your cup. I'm sorry, but I can't.
Okay, that's okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm walking around and like sometimes somebody would give money, but for the most part people didn't notice me. I was basically blending in to the street poles and the carts and the whatever. Like people didn't notice. And when somebody finally gave a coin, it was like, wow, he cares so much. I was like, I don't know, it was just an exercise for the sake of it itself. There was no greater purpose. I could have raised way more money in much better ways than collecting in the Machne Yehuda Shuk with a pushka. Make a fundraising campaign. I don't know. There's better ways to do it. But at least we got the feeling to be nosa ba'al, to be able to feel what that's like. The second example they gave here, when lighting candles on Erev Shabbos, think about people whose pain of loneliness is particularly noticeable on Shabbos, such as childless couples or ill children, singles, widows, divorcees, agunot, their children, etc., then plead for Hashem's mercy to send them a salvation so that their future Shabbos experiences will be joyful. The basic idea is we like to suppress the graphic details about what's going on and not embrace them because they're very uncomfortable. But the mitzvah of Noseh B'ol, by definition, is a mitzvah of discomfort. That's what it is. That's literally what it is be uncomfortable for the sake of your fellow Jew. So that's what we need to do. And they bring down a few stories here that bring out this point. Some of them are about the war, so I thought it was, I'm missing one. Oh no, they're there. Okay, so one is Ramichal Yehuda Lefkowitz was once present when the Mashgiach, Rav Levenstein, returned from visiting a sick person. Upon entering the room, the Mashgiach proceeded to explain with deep emotion, at great length and in minute detail, each aspect of the person's mental, emotional, and physical pain and anguish, literally recreating the patient's condition to all those who were present. Later he said, we then saw what it means to bear the suffering of another. So he went in there to visit somebody who was sick. He didn't just go in there and schmooze and chat. He noticed and took in all detail, every aspect of what that person's going through. Another story, this is a war story that happened in World War II. In 1941, just weeks after the Mir Yeshiva refugees arrived in Shanghai, Rav Levenstein, the Mashgiach, stressed the imperative of feeling the pain of their brethren that were trapped in World War II. Okay, listen to this. This is mental imagery. This is really thinking about what people are going through. We need to clearly visualize the awesome suffering that now consumes the world, and in particular, the suffering of our brothers and sisters. We need to visualize their suffering as if we are personally witnessing their suffering. We are hearing their cries, witnessing their bitterness, feeling their agonizing hunger, the freezing cold, their torture, and the savage acts done to them. We need to hear the death cries that pour out from the hearts of our people. It's not a fun picture to paint at all, that's for sure. The Chafetz Chaim, we know the Chafetz Chaim. During World War I, the Chafetz Chaim could not rest. He grieved constantly for the suffering of Klal Yisrael throughout Europe. He was well into his 80s when his wife woke up in the middle of the night and noticed that her saintly husband was not in his bed. She rose quickly to see if he was not feeling well and found him lying on the cold, hard floor with his hands bent under his head in place of a pillow. Seeing her elderly husband in such a position frightened her. So he explained his actions. I was lying so comfortably in my warm bed, and then I began to think of all my fellow Jews who have been forced from their homes by their advancing armies and have no warm bed to sleep in. How can I sleep in my bed while others sleep on the cold, hard floor? I too will do the same. So I got out of bed and I laid on the floor as well. Wow, that's really unbelievable. Let's do one more, the one on the bottom of this page. During the 6-Day War, okay, now we're getting even more recent. Rabbi Cheskel Levenstein demanded that his students visualize the suffering of the soldiers through vivid imagery. We must project ourselves into their dire state, picturing them in our mind as they are assailed in the foxholes in the cold and heat, while the peril of death hovers overhead. We dare not remain apathetic. As the war began, he told his students, in a time of war, we must feel the danger of our soldiers. The loss of one Jewish soldier, even when measured against the destruction of thousands of our enemies, is incalculable. And for every soldier who arrives home from battle alive, our joy must be unbounded. And after the victory also, he told his students to identify with the people who lost families in conflict. Hand in hand with our victory, another reality was created. Thousands of Jewish lives have been lost. How many thousands of families are bereft with a pain that is so great that it cannot be consoled? How many dear ones have been killed? How much this must weigh upon every Jewish soul? How much we must feel their pain, actually feel it as if our own. More than rejoicing over our enemies, we must feel the pain of our grieving brothers and sisters. Okay, and the last story I'll say over briefly is Reb Chaim Shulevitz was the head of the Mir Yeshiva, and he was very sensitive to Jews' suffering. And during the 1976 Entebbe hostage crisis, the Mir Yeshiva gathered to say Tehillim for the hostages who were stuck there. The Israeli army was going to this big operation to rescue them, but he couldn't even get up the stairs of the yeshiva. He walked in and he took one look around at the hundreds of students who were gathered to pray, and he started crying. He sat there crying for a few minutes, and he told everybody, imagine how you would be saying Tehillim now if it was your father or your mother or your brother or sister who were there, who were hostages. Another part of that story is, or part of the same Reb Shmulevitz, is he once heard of the loss of an IDF soldier's life, and he cried, and then he paused, and then he cried again, and then he paused, and then he cried again. And he explained himself. He said, first I cried for the life of the soldier that was cut short, and then he thought of the pain of the mother, that the mother is in, losing her son in battle, and he cried for that. And then he thought of the pain that the father must be in, and he cried for that. There's so many aspects of this. There's so much here. But I think the main message here is we need to visualize it. We need to embrace a very uncomfortable feeling. And that is to visualize in a graphic way, if need be, what our brothers and sisters are going through, if that's what it takes for us to feel their pain. Maybe we're more sensitive and we don't need we don't need to see such images or visualize such images or draw them up in our mind. But basically, whatever we need to do, we need to realize that their pain is our pain. It's not a third party. It's us. It's us that is suffering. It's us that were killed. It's us that were so horribly tortured last week. It's us that are going into fight right now in Gaza. It's all us. It's all us. We need to think about this and feel for the pain of our brothers and sisters. And this brings so much. It's a depressing topic to even talk about, but this leads the Jewish people to a very powerful place. When we're in unity with one another and we feel for one another, we help one another, we reach out to one another. Whatever we can do to send things or help is wonderful, but even just calling, texting, WhatsApping people who we know who are in Israel, who are affected in any way, and just letting them know that we feel their pain is so much of it. They're not looking for every one of the 15 million Jews around the world to pick up a rifle and go to Israel right now. They're not looking for that. But they are so comforted to hear when the soldiers right now are receiving gifts from all over the world. Okay, I'll ask you this: when they're receiving like practical, first aid kits and whatever, these are very helpful. But otherwise, they're getting letters, they're getting food, they're getting treats. Okay, I'm gonna assume that if you would not be sending them their food, they would still have food to eat. They would not go hungry. I'm sure the Israeli army gives food to their soldiers. So what is it? So it's better food for sure. It's homemade. But really, it's sent with love from our brothers and sisters. That's the most important thing. The letters are giving encouragement. They're giving such a boost to the Israeli army and to all the Jews there who know that we're with them. We have their back. I'm sure we could all relate that sometimes when we're going through something, all we need is somebody to understand us, to hear our pain. That's it. We're not looking for every person to get involved in our lives and solve our problems. But we do want, and we're encouraged so much when people feel our pain and they express that and they share that with us and we know that they're with us. That's it. That's really important. That's what we do for each other.